Right, so here we are again. Sorry about that delay, technical malfunction. I think we're back in action. Okay, so
Yeah,
where did we get to?
I was wondering about another thing. You are the first Druid that I meet and that I've met, and I was wondering, like, what does it mean for you to be a Druid, or what are Druids exactly? Maybe also for the people watching this. What are Druids exactly?
Well, it's an ancient title for people that had a certain gravitas within the community of the Celtic tribes, going back to at least 1500 BC, as can be documented. But so, you know, as old as Homer and the Trojan Wars, the epics are tales of the Greeks. You know, every tribe has always had, throughout history, its seers, its visionaries and its prophets and its saints and so on. Every religion acknowledges that, you know, to stay alive as human people, we need people that can hold that spiritual energy for the community. In the Christian church, they're called saints. In the ancient Celtic world, they were called Druids, and there are variants of that word in Gaul, in Breton language, in Ireland, you know, in Scotland, Wales, but also the Celts were living in Austria, Switzerland, Belgium. Your mother's Belgian, isn't she?
Yeah.
So she would go back probably to some ancient Celtic original, you know, ancestral tree. If you go back to 1000 BC, when Caesar conquered Gaul, he also conquered the Belgic Gauls, and their great leader was called Ambiorix, who's now like a hero for the Belgian people.
Yeah, you've told me. Yeah.
And so, yeah, the Druids were the truth seers. They didn't do politics as such. That's why I'm not a politician. I'm not a, you know, a politician, an MP, a lord or anything. They weren't even monarchs, Druids. They were humble people, simple people. They didn't have great wealth. They had great intellectual power. And they were sworn to non-violence. This is the key thing about the Druids. When I discovered, I'd always been interested in them personally as a scholar. And then I discovered they were still alive. You know, there were Druids in the Celtic fringes of Britain. And discovered there was a council for them and so on. And that's how I got to know, you know, Druid colleagues. And so that's what I find interesting about them. They were sworn to peace. So they were the peace intelligentsia of Europe, going right back before the Roman Empire expanded and conquered and tried to destroy them. And what I've discovered is a lot of the ancient cities and capital cities of parts of Europe that are now very important were actually founded by the Celts. And I'm about to publish a book on European-wide studies of Druidry. And so it's come as a great thing of interest to me that Milan was a Celtic city. Yeah. It's one of the most economically vibrant cities in Italy. It was the Druid foundation, and you go to the Archaeological Museum of Milan. Don't know if you've been.
Not yet, no.
Go, it's really interesting. It's right in the centre of town, and it shows you the maps of the old Roman city, which had its four gates, north, south, east, west, and the road systems, like Gloucester, say, which is a classic Roman city in England. But before that, it was a Celtic city. And so Celtic geomancers would have laid the sacred structure of the city with the temples and making sure the gods were all having their right quadrants and things. And at that time, the Celts were learning a lot from the Etruscans, who were also great at communing with the gods.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so I'm interested in the links between the Druids, the Celts, and the Etruscans, and the Romans. The Romans were pretty wise to begin with. Their great king, Numa Pompilius, who is one of my intellectual heroes, Plutarch writes about him in his book. Numa Pompilius founded the Roman religion. Romulus founded Rome, you know, but it was very warlike. Yeah. And Numa Pompilius specifically said he was going to now pacify the Roman martial spirit and bring the arts of peace to Rome. The arts of civilization, and he did so by establishing festivals, religious rites, rituals, piety, personal piety, which is the heart of religion, and then communal piety, which is the festival, the feast, the celebration in the temple. And Numa was advised by a woman called Egeria, who was a muse, who he met in the forest like a nymph, like a goddess, or a muse. And I find that such a beautiful, moving story. The king who brings peace to Rome.
Yes.
So he's a good king. And the Druids, we always like to work with good kings and queens. And so if you look at the history of Britain and Ireland and stuff, you discover all these mysterious Druid figures. And in Gaul as well. So I think this is such good news, it should come out and be shared. Because, you probably didn't learn this stuff in school, that there were pan-European intellectuals into peace who could commune with the gods.
No.
They never taught you that.
No, we talked about Celtic.
You did a bit of stuff on Celtic history in history lessons.
So you said Druids work together with good kings. Why do you think this issue of Brexit, or what happened yesterday in Parliament, in what way is it a Druid issue for you?
Well, because my job as a senior Druid, I'm the peace Druid of Britain still, and now in Europe, is to ensure that our political leaders are behaving according to moral law. Somebody has to keep them to account spiritually. In the Christian concept, that was the job of the Archbishop. I've written to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's about as useful as I don't know what. He seems to have lost his tongue. I mean, if I was Archbishop of Canterbury, I'd be doing a Thomas à Becket and opposing this illegal junta that have captured my country. And I know quite a lot about the history of Thomas à Becket. He's one of my heroes. We need people like that. So he was like the Druid of his day, standing up against the politics of Henry II's corrupt militarism. And it was Henry II, by the way, who first authorised the invasion of Ireland by the English Norman army. So dear old Henry II owes a lot of bad karma to be sorted out. He killed Thomas à Becket. You've no doubt heard of Thomas à Becket. You know the story?
Yeah.
Okay, and then he then invaded Ireland, and it's been mayhem ever since. So that's the chaos that's caused by a bad king who slaughters his archdruid, his archbishop, and then goes off and rampages around Ireland. And what the English did was just, ransack the cultural heritage. They destroyed a lot of the libraries. Some good English became Iricised. They became the Anglo-Irish. And some of them loved Ireland and learned its lessons, learned its mythology, and protected their ancient books. But others, like Cromwell's army, they just destroyed and massacred. So why should Thomas à Becket type stand up against corrupt rulers? Well, because that's our duty. That's what Christ was doing. You see, we Druids believe in Europe that Christ was also a Druid. He was a truth-sayer against power. He was someone that had tremendous courage, intellectual brilliance, spiritual connectivity. He could commune with, the ultimate God the Father, he called them, right? But lurking behind that is God the Mother, God the Holy Spirit. And he was a good man who wanted truth to prevail, which is why he had the courage to go to Jerusalem and teach in the temple, knowing that he'd probably be killed and arrested and all that. So that's our mission too. We have to do that.
Good.
And I don't know where all the other... I mean, there are other voices. I'm not the only one, thank Christ, but there aren't enough. And I'm very disappointed at the church leaders in Britain, who should have been campaigning against Brexit and all its idiocy from day one, because the people that are proposing it are anti-Christian, literally. We're dealing with the kind of... What do I mean by anti-Christian? Because they're anti-intellectuals, they're anti-kindness, they're anti-love, because they have an educational inability to see the positive aspects of European culture. They've been brainwashed into thinking Europe is evil and dark. And, it's not. It's the complete opposite. That's why it's a Druid issue to me.
And my next question, as a philosopher, what is your philosophy take on this?
Thank you. The events of last night, again, shocked me as a philosopher, because all my training, when I studied at the University of London, I ran 33 meetings in the House of Lords back in the 90s and 2000s, with intellectually astute politicians who welcomed me in. We had meetings on ethics and policy in London. I've got all the records and archives upstairs. We had interfaith leaders, we had Sufis, Tibetan Buddhists, Christians, Druids came in. We had great conversations in the Lords about ethics. I'm a philosopher that believes that philosophy has a mission to increase the intelligence quotient of all of us. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is philosophy? It means to love wisdom, to be prepared to walk that extra mile in search of truth. I'm the guy that when I was 21 used to walk up through the blizzards of Calgary deep winter with books of Kant and Hegel on my back and sit in my cabin and read them all, and like I've struggled and worked for philosophy to me it's my lifeblood, and I believe it is for all genuine intellectuals, and the thing about the European Union's commitment to peace is what mostly attracts me. Mm-hmm. It arose out of the chaos of World War II. I mean, the devastating after effect of the war in Europe was horrendous. As a historian, I've studied modern European history, you see, at the London School of Economics and the University of London. That's my degree. And I know there was starvation, there was homelessness, huge parts of Europe were destroyed, and people were starving, and, it was chaos. And so the European Union was kind of thought up as an idea to bring economic stability and gradually to get like a downing of the fires of revenge and hatred that otherwise flare up every now and then. My friend Adam Curl, Professor of Peace Studies at the University of Bradford, he wrote a seminal paper called The Fire in the Peat about peace studies. He said that peats in the bogs of Ireland, it sometimes catches fire. You can't see it from the surface, but it flashes up occasionally because it's on fire actually down below, like 6 feet underground, and it's really hard to put out the fire. And he said some conflicts are like that. And that's kind of European history in a nutshell. The fire in the peat is always there. So Protestants and Catholics will always flare up again if you let them, because they're just like intellectually they're diametrically opposed types of ways of looking at the world. And so that's what happened when Yugoslavia collapsed. The fire in the peat broke out again, and Muslims and Catholics and Orthodox and all that started slitting each other's throats, because they're just like stupid, sorry, And I've just been in Slovenia meeting some very brilliant intellectuals who still are like pulling their hair out about how it happened on their watch. I don't want this to happen in Britain on my watch. It's the fire in the peat trying to come out again. I'm part of the firefighting team, and I have many, types of equipment to fight the fire in the peat. One of them is pure philosophy. It's a powerful hose that you can. It puts out most fires. What is philosophy? It's the art of wonder. That's what Aristotle defined it as. I mean, if I could take those politicians that were baying and barking yesterday in Parliament and take them to a mountain in Ireland, Craig Patrick or something, and make them fast overnight and just watch the dawn come up, a sense of wonder would descend on them. This is a beautiful island we live in. Why would we want to destabilise it and cause grief? So it starts with wonder, and then it proceeds to a place of aporia, which is the Greek word for not knowing anything at all, and I'm totally stuck. Because what we thought was true turns out to be not true. So you get to a place of aporia, and then finally you work through dialectic, which is Socrates having a discussion like we're doing kind of thing, and then you get to lysis, which is the Greek word for enlightenment, which is everybody wants enlightenment, like Buddhists want it, Hindus want it, Jews, Christians, everybody wants it. Greeks thought of this a long time ago. They called it lysis, which means setting free and loosening and liquefying. Lysis is, unlike enlightenment, which comes from light, lysis is what happens when you wash a problem with water. And that's the origin of the word analysis. So you analyse stuff. It washes away the problems. And psychoanalysis. So those are some of the tools philosophy has we could solve the problems of conflict and war. So that's why I coordinate philosophers of peace in Britain and Europe. And I'm part of a worldwide network of philosophers working on that stuff. And Brexit to me is a threat to peace. It's a threat to the peace of the UK itself and the island of Ireland. And then it's a threat to Europe. And the people that are behind it, when I look into their histories, Nigel Farage has no degree. He's never studied philosophy. He doesn't even have a degree, for God's sake. Steve Bannon is a military type. He invented this World of Warcraft nonsense that has brainwashed a whole bunch of our kids. You know, he's a military thinker. He thinks in combat terms. And he walks around like sort of some little petty general, you know. That's not how you get lysis. So philosophy is a powerful tool to clear away the chaos these people are causing. And as for Dominic Cummings, you know, I mean, even people that know him call him some kind of psychopath or sociopath. I mean, he probably just needs some therapy. You know, a nice holiday in Austria or something. Poor chap. Okay, now what's the next one?
Touching upon the point of therapy, I know that you also used to work in medicine and healing. What kind of healing perspective could you bring to this?
Okay, so I was very influenced by Pythagoras when I was a young student starting out. And I remember the famous saying of Pythagoras was, "I come not to teach, but to heal." I love that saying, you know, you put that over my, the entrance to my study. And I've always thought of my work as a philosopher, as a healer, first and foremost, in that Pythagorean tradition, which became the Platonic tradition. Plato was a Pythagorean, effectively. And I ended up working in hospitals in Canada, trained as a nurse in Audley, and I learned physiology. I learned all about how the physical body works.
Yes.
And I'm greatly respectful of the history of medicine. I taught courses on the history of medicine at the University of Oxford, based on all my years' work in hospitals, when I would spend hours in the library studying physiology from the conventional medical point of view, like Gray's Anatomy stuff, combining it with subtle physiology, which I was studying from Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist sources, like what are the energy systems, the meridians, the chakras, because I'm interested in the soul nature of the body. Where does the soul live in the body, you know? I live just down the road from where Descartes used to be based, so I don't accept Descartes' idea that the soul and the body are totally separate and only united through the pineal gland. I think we have to realise the soul suffuses the body, and that if you have an ill body, you can help it heal through some sort of spiritual work. I mean, I have great respect for spiritual healers and so on, and among whom Christ was one of the best. So to me, philosophy and healing are kind of the same thing. I've been to Kos, where Hippocrates founded the first medical Asclepion, because in ancient Greek medicine they thought healing was under the god Asclepius, who was like the god of medicine, and that's why doctors swear an oath to the thing with the snake going up the staff. That's the medical symbol, and that's why they take the Hippocratic oath to this day, which I think all academics, when I got my PhD, I took an internal Hippocratic oath to use my knowledge for the benefit of humanity. So healing conflict is what we should be doing. I don't know why more academics aren't speaking out and seeing through what's going on here. But to me as a healer, I have responsibility. The image that I use for Brexit is, so politics, to be a senior statesman, you need to be quite skillful and wise. Plato called it an art, the art of statesmanship, right? And it's not something that just anybody can do. And this is why I think there should be a license for it. In the old days, academia, you wouldn't really get into politics unless you had at least a degree. And in those days, degrees actually meant something. You had to work really hard, and they had a spiritual, intellectual robustness about them. They seem to have dumbed down degrees nowadays, and you can get degrees in anything from anywhere, and I think that's sad. So they don't act as a check anymore on the integrity of politicians. So I think it's time to have an actual license to do politics, like airplane pilot's license,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have an ethical component. Now, if you try and do politics without that license, you end up destroying stuff, like Hitler did. Hitler didn't have a license. Hitler had no education to speak of. He had no qualifications. He should not have been let near power. Mussolini the same. The people who've done most damage in modern European political history have been uneducated. So, it's one of the most problem issues. And to me, I take the thing that if I needed brain surgery, and I go in, I would want the surgeon to have some training, to know what they're doing. I mean, I've watched surgery actually when I worked at the National Hospital of Nervous Diseases in Bloomsbury,
Mm-hmm.
which is Britain's main centre for national neurological work.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how incredibly complex the brain is, and I have huge admiration for these surgeons.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't let a surgeon operate on somebody's brain unless they had immense qualifications and experience.
Yeah.
And yet we're letting politicians operate on our country. Brexit is like surgery. It's cutting off Scotland from the UK, and it's cutting off England and the UK from Europe. It is surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But it's surgery that's being conducted by unqualified, untrained and unexperienced surgeons. It's like people using hacksaws
Mm-hmm.
or chainsaws. I wouldn't let them in a surgery, So I'm lamenting the loss of subtle and sophisticated and highly intelligent politicians. But there are still some. There's people like Dominic Grieve, there's Jo Swinson, although she's young. Jeremy Corbyn also, although he's not brilliantly educated, he has a moral sense, he has a moral decency about him. And, it's not restricted to any one party, so, So I hope that those people of sense can realise we have a job to heal the country.
Mm-hmm.
But for that, we have to actually get the real experts in.
Yeah.
Mm.
And my last but not least question, part of your doctoral thesis was on psychology. Can you explain shortly what it was about, and how does that influence your view on Brexit or last night's events?
Gosh, okay, so as a subset of healing, I'm particularly interested in psychology, and I've studied for many years and taught the history of psychology. Actually, it was coined as a word by a German Lutheran theologian called Goclenius, I discovered.
Okay.
I didn't know this before. Who lived in about 1600, who wrote a PhD thesis on tears, which was amazing. And he was a very popular professor in Wittenberg or somewhere. He knew Luther.
Mm-hmm.
And he had more doctoral students in Germany at the time than anyone else. He must have been an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Like a PhD on tears, right? So he coined the word psychology to describe the scientific study of the soul and what that means. And although Aristotle, of course, had pioneered the actual thinking through of it in his famous book on the soul, and that to me is the key question. I've just been to this exhibition of Siberian shamanism in St. Petersburg, where these shamans
Or the official
in
one
Slovenia.
was, yeah.
It's in St. Petersburg, but it was visiting Ljubljana, so I could see it there.
Yeah.
And these every culture and civilization had its shamans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and their main job is to heal souls. How do you do that? What is the soul? So these are huge, important questions. In my PhD thesis, I looked at the Cold War and the conflict between the superpowers and the history of the last 50 years in world history, and why we're on the brink of nuclear omnicide. So this is the biggest challenge to, I don't do small things. I thought I'll take the big one on. And I came up with the hypothesis that it's caused by a loss of soul. We're like, our world has lost its soul, and whether you're on the right or the left, I mean, the soul is circular. It's spherical, as Plotinus said. It's not right or left. And the problem with political discourse is it's dualistic thinking. And so we've cut our soul into a million pieces. So the challenge I looked at in my PhD thesis was how we can develop a more sophisticated form of history that can study the history of these conflicts, putting the soul back into historical analysis. Because mostly history and psychology don't really happen. They don't marry up. When you do history, you get taught diplomacy, wars, economics if you're lucky, and all that stuff, but not the soul. But what is really important in life is our soul histories. You know, your life story, our life stories. It's our psycho histories that matter. And I would say our collective psycho histories. And so the Brexit thing is a challenge for psychohistorians to piece together why this narrative of conflict, why this narrative of separation became sexy to some people. Why did this like anti-European rhetoric start off? It's got psychological explanations. And so scientific, advanced transpersonal psychology can explain some of it. It's to do with othering, it's to do with projecting onto the other negativity that you don't want to look at. It's to do with alienation from the other. And it's to do with the question to ask is why do people find it easier to hate than to love? As a psychologist of history, obviously wars are caused by hate, you know. I publish the only academic journal in the world on the nature of love, for God's sake. You know, we should be looking at love more as intellectuals, finding out what is love. To me, love is an appreciation of wholeness. If I love somebody, I love the whole of them. Or, you know, anything, a view. If I'm sitting watching a view and I say, I love this. I love it because it fits together beautifully and harmoniously as a whole. If I love a book, like War and Peace or a great work, it's because it's so amazingly fitting together. It's a wholeness, right? And the words soul and whole come from a similar etymology, actually. So, psychologically, the Brexit nonsense is a psycho nightmare that's happened. And the people that, I watched them in the Commons baying for Brexit, I think they are mentally ill. I'm sorry, they literally are, because they've, I'm happy to do counselling with these people because they're going to have a very negative effect on my country. And it's like this psychopathology is now spread across whole swathes of the people of Britain. I think it's spread by the media. I think that plays a big role. There is a scientific society that studies political psychology, which I've been in touch with over the years. My PhD supervisor was a psychologist who looked at conflict resolution and peacemaking.
That's very interesting.
It's, people, we need to grow out of this propensity to attack and so on. I mean, the language used by the Bannon, Farage, Brexit types is all about battles, attack, strategy, defeat, win. Boris Johnson, he's like a little petty corporal, you can see him bullying people around the playground. It's pathetic and it's very sad. So we need a psychology of these leaders, why they become pathological, why they think that look, even his own sister is now saying that nobody agrees with Boris Johnson in the family. There's family dynamics here in family history. His brothers resigned. So we should recover our souls. And what I'm saying as a Druid, shaman, philosopher, psychologist is that Brexit has caused, I think, a huge shock to my country. But if we can get over this, as I believe we can, if we can recover our soul at the last minute, if we can give deep thanks to you Europeans for your patience, because, you could have turned around and just said, no more extensions, get out, Thank you, you're still holding a place for us, I hope. We'll probably soon have another election, and I think the progressive forces need to unite. So Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Greens, Plaid Cymru and so on, need to make an electoral pact, in my opinion, so that only one progressive Remain person stands in any constituency, so everyone can vote for them. And I think the person to stand should be the one that got the most votes last time. So if the Greens got the most votes, like in Brighton, that person should stand. If the Lib Dems got the most votes, they should stand. If Labour got the most, they should stand. And we should bury the hatchet between I'm a Green, I'm a Lib Dem, I'm a Labour. You know, there's been a lot of infighting. That should all go. And we should have one united, like, Save the Country, Remain alliance, which could win this next election, which will be coming soon, and then would reverse all this Brexit nightmare. Probably with a second referendum to confirm it. But first they'd have to, like, vote, I think, to rescind Article 50 and just put the brakes on. So, yes, so that will come when we've found our soul. And then our wholeness can be restored. And that means the United Kingdom can stay together. We might even be able to persuade our dear friends the Scots to please stay with us. Although I think they're going to leave. And I think we just have to let them do their thing now. I love the Scots, but the English have kicked them in the teeth over Brexit. It shames me. And I think they deserve to be an independent country again within the European Union. If the UK stays in the European Union, then it's fine. They can have a nice, peaceful, you go your way and I'll go mine, as Bob Dylan said. But we all stay friends and neighbours. So anyway, I'm positive. The forces of dark always look terrifying. And I think, again, Bob Dylan, one of my heroes, said, you know, the darkest hour is always just before the dawn.
Yeah.
So let's just pray that dawn's coming. And let's make it happen. Okay.
And listen to Bob Dylan.
That will help get us through. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I surely did.
Thank you so much for asking all the questions. And thanks for coming to the museum. And I hope you're enjoying your stay
Yes,
here.
I am.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
stay, you know, for a little while longer. We're doing some
All right.
important work. Thank you.
Yes.